Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. Please be seated. I am really honored to be here with all of you this afternoon. And I want to thank the chair of our party, Jennifer Horn, for everything that she does here in the state of New Hampshire for our party, for her passion, for her energy in ensuring that we have a strong party to get Republicans elected in November. So thank you so much, Jennifer. And I'm honored to have the area vice chair here, Louis Pope. Thank you very much for everything that you do. And it's terrific to see so many of our chairs and committee men and committee women. I, of course, am most proud of our committee woman, Juliana Bergeron, and our committee man, Steve Dupree, for what they do. Thank you. And for what our whole party is doing, and especially Juliana and Steve, to make sure that New Hampshire keeps the first in the nation primary. And we're going to show over the next couple of days why it's important that we keep this first in the nation primary, because we do grassroots politics well in New Hampshire. And asking the tough questions of the candidates is something that is part of our blood here in New Hampshire. So we're very, very proud to host all of you here today, but especially to host the first in the nation presidential primary. And I know you're going to hear from some great speakers. We have Senator Rick Santorum here, and I know you're going to hear from him later. It's great to see you, Rick. And this morning, I know some of you may wonder, like, why are you in green? You look like it's St. Patrick's Day early. Well, I want to wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Day early, because this morning I was at a wild Irish breakfast with Governor Bobby Jindal from Louisiana, and I got to tell you, he was really funny. So I think you should set your expectations high later for him as well. So we're glad to have all these wonderful leaders in our party here in my hometown of Nashua, but also in the state of New Hampshire, because we're gathered here today to talk about the future of the Republican Party, that we're united by a common goal, and that is to get more Republicans elected so that we can make a difference for this country, for our states, at the local level. And I guess I'll just start with a simple question. How many of you would like to see the Republican Party become the governing party, not only here in New Hampshire, but across the nation? Raise your hand. And how many of you believe that we will be better off by putting Republican principles into policy, into action, fiscal responsibility, a smaller, more accountable government, a government that adheres to the Constitution of the United States of America, and one that ensures that our country remains safe and strong? Those are the principles that are at stake in this election. And I don't think that we should continue to settle for being the minority party, the opposition party. We cannot settle for that designation, because if we do, the country will continue to lose. And I can assure you that spending some time in Washington, D.C., it's no fun being in the minority party living by Harry Reid's rules. In fact, you know, the Senate used to be called the world's most deliberative body in the world. Under the leadership of Harry Reid, it's now the my way or the highway body in the Senate, unfortunately. And frankly, it's bad for the institution, it's bad for the country, and it does not allow people to get a vote on something that makes sense, no matter what party you're from. And time after, again, in representing you, I've put forth common sense proposals only to see Harry Reid kill them by not even allowing a vote. Now, you can disagree with me on something, but it seems to me that in a democracy, if you've come up with an idea that relates to the debate you're having, that you should be able to get a vote on it. Now, here's a recent example that I've pressed on many occasions. Straightforward legislation that really would stop fraud in our tax code. It's something that would stop illegal immigrants from fraudulently claiming the additional child tax credit, something identified by the Treasury Department, identified by many investigations that cost taxpayers billions of dollars. And here was my amendment, very simple, simple fix. If you file for this tax refund, then just list a Social Security number next to the child that you are claiming, so that we know actually that that child lives in this country and that that child exists. Because unfortunately, we've seen too much fraud in situations like that. Sounds pretty reasonable, doesn't it? Exactly. But this is an example of where Harry Reid wouldn't allow a vote on something common sense, even though we could save taxpayer dollars and billions of taxpayer dollars that are flowing out the door, and with many instances of fraud. We've seen the same thing on Obamacare. You know where I stand on Obamacare. I want to repeal Obamacare. And let's just be clear. Every Republican in the United States Senate wants to repeal Obamacare and replace it with common sense reforms that actually allow people to keep their doctors, have more choice, drive down costs, and actually put the choices back in the hands of the people instead of what the government is telling you you have to do and the kind of plan that it's telling you you have to purchase. Now, we've seen what's happening with this law. I mean, I have to tell you, my time in the Senate, the correspondence that I'm getting from constituents in New Hampshire with stories about the impact of Obamacare, causing people to lose doctors, lose coverage that they wanted, having to pay more for the coverage or higher deductibles, things that do not meet their family's needs. And I hear those stories every day. You know, I'm out shopping and I have people stopping me in the grocery store, telling me stories about the impact of Obamacare. But what does Harry Reid have to say about that? He's in denial. He said that these stories aren't true. Well, I want Harry to come down and live in the real world and talk to some real people about the impact that this law is having on individuals who unfortunately are not able to keep physicians that they want to keep, are paying more than they want to pay for health care, and aren't able to make the choices that they want to make in their lives because of this law. Yet many of the proposals that have set forward, even some of them bipartisan, do you think that Harry Reid will bring up a vote for that? No. One of them, for example, you may have heard about, actually changes the work week in this country. So part of Obamacare changed the definition of a full-time employee to 30 hours a week in an effort to force employers with more than 50 full-time employees to offer Obamacare-approved coverage or pay a financial penalty. Who ever heard of a 30-hour work week in terms of defining what the work week is by Washington standards? It makes no sense. And I've heard, I can tell you another thing, I've been stopped by on the way in the airport, stories of a father who said to me, you know, my son's hours are being cut. And what he's being told is because it's a result of the health care law, because of this 40-hour requirement. So I'm backing a bill that actually restores the 40-hour work week. You'd think that would make sense. But I wouldn't count, unfortunately, on a vote anytime soon. And this happens on issue after issue after issue in the United States Senate right now. And I could go through each of them for you. And I have to say that this isn't just something that Republicans, we fall victim to this more than Democrats. But even my Democratic colleagues have had common sense bipartisan proposals that if Harry Reid and the president don't like your proposal, then you're not going to get a vote on it in the United States Senate. And that is no way to run the most deliberative body in the world, and that is no way to run a democracy. And that is one of the things that is at issue when we think about taking a majority of Republicans in the United States Senate this fall, because I can assure you that we will respect the Constitution, we will respect that the Senate is a very important part of our democracy, and it will not be a my way or the highway Senate. We will have vigorous debate, and if you have a common sense proposal, then you will get a vote on it. And I think that the American people deserve nothing less. Now, with President Obama, as I look at where we are, we have Harry Reid on one end of Pennsylvania Avenue, right? And then he's stonewalling votes on even the most common sense proposals. And we can go through not just the ones I raised, but many more examples. And at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, there's President Obama, who's made it clear that he's just going to bypass Congress when it suits him, and when we're doing something that he doesn't like, or he just feels like he needs to do something. Now, you may have all heard at the beginning of this year that President Obama said, "I've got a pen and I've got a phone," which was his way of saying that I don't need Congress. Well, I don't know about all of you, but when I learned about government in grade school, I always thought that the Constitution was clear. The legislative branch is in charge of making the laws, and the executive branch carries them out. Apparently, he missed that basic grade school lesson. But that's not how President Obama sees it, because time after time, we've seen him flex his executive authority as a matter of political convenience. And stay tuned, because as we come forward to the elections in November, I am guaranteeing you, we will see him again make changes with his so-called pen and phone that should come before the United States Congress in order to ensure that they are in a better position to win these elections. And so this, to me, is a fundamental problem when it comes to our Constitution and what should be happening just on the Affordable Care Act alone. By one example, the president has changed it by executive order or in some administrative fashion over 20 times, just with that act alone. We also saw the president go around the Senate when he packed the National Labor Relations Board with his hand-picked pro-labor allies. He wouldn't even bother to have them confirmed. Now, this is not this December, but the December before. That has been challenged in the United States Supreme Court. I have joined on the amicus brief challenging the president's action as a violation of the recess clause of the United States Constitution. And here's my prediction of what the Supreme Court will do with this. I think the Supreme Court's going to call this for what it is: unconstitutional. And it's time that it happens. Now, you may have seen recent media reports that Wednesday, the House passed a piece of legislation. The lead sponsor of it in the House, I believe, is Representative Trey Gowdy, who's a really good guy. And that law is pretty simple. It's called the Enforce Act. I am a co-sponsor of the Senate version, but what it does is it aims to ensure that the president upholds his constitutional obligation to take care that laws be faithfully executed and enforced. So we can all clap, but here's the bigger question. Should we really need a law to tell the president to follow the Constitution of the United States of America? It strikes me as something I'm glad to co-sponsor this law, and I hope that it passes the Senate. It's just passed the House. But again, why should we need a law to say follow the Constitution of the United States? Now, before I leave, I want to talk to you about an area that I am very deeply concerned about where we are right now. And it's not just the domestic policy of the United States of America under this president, but I'm very concerned about our position in the world. As I look back at the legacy of Ronald Reagan, President Reagan stood for the strength of America, and his vision of America as the shining city on the hill is the vision of America that I know that our party shares, and is the vision of a strong and safe America that leads in the world. But right now, where we are, it's a very dangerous and troubling time in the world. And when I see images of Russian troops invading the Ukraine, the Crimean region of Ukraine, here's what flashes in my mind. This is what I think of. I see the image of President Obama getting caught in 2012 telling the Russian president, "This is my last election. After my election, I have more flexibility." The Russian leader replied, I will transmit this information to Vladimir." Well, he certainly did, and Vladimir Putin did get the message. Right now, we're in a position where our allies often feel abandoned and confused, and our enemies feel emboldened. I'm also reminded about something else that happened in 2012. I know many of you in this room, as myself included, we worked very hard on Mitt Romney's campaign for president. And when Mitt Romney called Russia America's main geopolitical foe, Hillary Clinton said, "I think it's somewhat dated to be looking backwards instead of being realistic about where we agree and where we don't agree." Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, Mitt was right. But what we have seen with President Obama is time and time again, he has made concession after concession to the Russians. It started with the removal of the missile defense systems in Czech and the Poland Republic when he got into office. And what do we get in return for those concessions, where he didn't speak up forcefully and should have on many occasions? The Russians are arming the Assad regime, giving arms so that the Assad regime can murder its own people. The Russians have been accused of potentially violating the INF Treaty, even though we entered the New START Treaty with the Russians naively under President Obama. The Russians stopped adoptions of innocent children, where good Americans were looking to help Russian children that wouldn't otherwise have a home. And they were willing to put children in the way of what they wanted to accomplish. The Russians are harboring Snowden. And we can go on and on and on. And so time and time again, we have not only sent the wrong message to the Russians, but we have sent the wrong message to many of the rogues around the world. And lest anyone forget, it was Hillary Clinton who pushed the reset button with Russia in a photo op with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. I'm really looking forward to seeing that in campaign commercials. It is time for the Obama administration not only to admit that many of their domestic policies, including Obamacare, have been a failure, but that the reset policy with Russia has also been a failure. Let's face it, Putin is playing hardball, and Obama is playing t-ball. That's where we are. I know under strong leadership, we would send a very different message to President Putin. And it is one where we are asserting American leadership. And stay tuned, because this is a very important time on this issue. to ensure that we impose sanctions on those who are in the direct circle of Vladimir Putin. You know where they educate their kids? Here. Do you know where they put their money? They don't keep their money in Russia. So we do have an opportunity to send a message. We do have an opportunity if we have a president that stands up and speaks clearly and actually takes actions that are consistent with what he says. But I am worried that we're going to find ourselves in the same pattern we have found ourselves over and over again. The pattern where President Obama lays out a red line and suddenly it's blurred, that sends the wrong message to the people like Putin who are continue to show aggression toward other countries and toward our allies. And don't forget, the Ayatollahs in Iran are watching. They will watch whether we actually do put real sanctions on the Russian government, whether we put sanctions on the people who are in Vladimir Putin's inner circle and those in the Ukraine who are trying to suppress democracy. They will look to see what we do, and we should worry if we do not act. The Ayatollahs in Iran are watching, and they, as you know, have been seeking nuclear weapons capability. And frankly, I'm fearful that the administration's weak position on negotiations with Iran will again put us in a position where we talk and Iran keeps marching forward toward a nuclear weapon. That's not acceptable to our safety nor the safety of the world. And I want to say that it's not just the domestic policies of this presidency, but it is also the foreign policy of this presidency as to why this election in November matters so much to our country. And I would be remiss if I did not leave without talking about an issue that Chairman Horn mentioned that I absolutely believe matters. It has been a year and a half since terrorists killed 4 brave Americans in Benghazi. And to this day, no one has been held accountable. No one. The terrorists that are involved in this attack are giving interviews, some of them to American news outlets, but the US government has not gone after them. And I want to say to Hillary Clinton that this does matter. It matters very much. But we're going to have a difficult time, as I have had time and time and again, in getting to the truth in the United States Senate. But I will continue to push if we do not win elections in November. So that's what you are all here for today, because it matters so much for our country that we win this November. It matters so that we can stand together, so that we can ensure a more prosperous nation that lifts up all Americans, so that we can work together to advance our principles, to advance our vision that we share of fiscal responsibility, our vision of an accountable, limited government that works for the people, not in reverse. Our vision of a government that adheres to the Constitution of the United States of America, and our vision of a government of where people have the opportunity to pursue the American dream, and the government doesn't stand in your way. And finally, one where America is that shining city on the hill that Ronald Reagan talked about, where we are viewed by allies around the world as a friend that they can rely on, but also that enemies understand that you don't mess with the United States of America. But unfortunately, I don't think that's the message that they're getting right now, and it's making us less safe. This conference is going to lay the foundation for us to win in November. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we work together. We cannot continue to fight among ourselves. I think we all know who wins when we fight among ourselves. The Democrats win and the country loses. So at this conference, I know that you're all going to be focused on making sure that we have the best organizations to get people to the polls and to get our message out in November. But I also hope that you will focus on what unites us, because there is so much that unites us as a party that will make a difference for this country. And I want to leave you with this. I feel confident that if we unite together, nothing can stop us, and that we will win in November and make a difference for the greatest country on earth, the United States of America. May God bless you, and may God bless our great country.